They laughed when I dropped out of ROC, said I couldn't handle the heat, the orders, the grit. My own sister, Ashley, called me civilian material, like it was some kind of insult. At every family dinner, she got the spotlight. They toasted her promotions, pinned medals on cakes, and told the same war stories like reruns from her glory days. Me? I was just there. Even after I enlisted, quietly, without fanfare, without a single family member knowing, they still treated me like a joke. "Oh, Lena's playing soldier now," they'd say, half laughing. But they didn't know a thing. Not about the years I served under code names or the places I went or the scars that don't bleed but still ache. And yet, standing there, boots dusty, 5 stars in my pocket, I watched Ashley drilling a fresh batch of recruits on base. She didn't even recognize me, didn't see me. Not until her sergeant leaned in, eyes wide, and whispered, "General, ma'am." The silence that followed, sharp enough to cut steel. For the first time, she saw me. Not the dropout, not the disappointment, but someone she'd never even bothered to ask about. That's not where the story starts, though. Hi, I'm Lena Caldwell. I've stayed silent for a long time about where I went and what I did, but today I'm ready to talk. Before I begin, if you're listening, really listening, just drop a quick listening in the comments, or tell me where you're from. I love knowing how far stories like this can travel. And if anything in this hits home, please consider subscribing. It means more than you know. Now, let me tell you what really happened. It was a cool October evening when I pulled into the gravel driveway of my childhood home just outside of Tacoma. The porch light flickered, still broken, still ignored. The Huxley family mailbox leaned like it always had, slanted left like my dad's politics and my mom's judgmental glare. The invitation, if you could call it that, came in a text from my mother. "Come for Ash's party. Don't dress weird. No, we miss you. No, how are you?" Just a command, like I was 17 again being told to wash your hands before dinner. Inside, it smelled like baked ham and cinnamon. The dining room looked like something out of a military recruiting ad. Banners, printed programs, a homemade poster that screamed, "Congrats, Lieutenant Ashley Caldwell." No one looked up when I stepped in, not even Ashley. I wore a gray button-up, plain slacks, no ribbons, no stars, nothing to make me stand out. But I never really fit in this house anyway. I was just tolerated, like wallpaper you're too lazy to replace. Dad was the first to acknowledge me, if you could call it that. "What are you doing these days?" he asked, already turning back to Ashley before I could even open my mouth. Then he launched into some speech about Ashley's top performance scores in field strategy, like I was invisible. Aunt Carla, already halfway through her 3rd glass of Merlot, chimed in from across the table. "Didn't you used to pretend to be a waitress? Looks like you went pro, huh?" She laughed. I didn't. Instead, I smiled, calm, controlled, surgical. I'm much better pretending now. It landed like a scalpel, polite, clean, but with the kind of ache that creeps in hours later. As the family toasted Ashley, glasses raised high, I was asked, without irony, to fetch more forks and refill the water. No one offered to help. No one asked if I was okay. It was just expected. I moved like muscle memory, fetch, pour, return, watch. And the whole time I remembered the moment, 10 years earlier, when I walked out of that house, shattered from something I couldn't even name yet. I left behind a full ride to Stanford, walked away after a breakdown no one saw and no one asked about. They labeled it weakness, but 3 weeks later I enlisted. Not under my name. Military intelligence, black contracts, my records scrubbed clean from university databases. No trace of Lena Caldwell, Stanford dropout, just a ghost in a uniform, living in codes and whispers. Back at the dinner, I stood awkwardly. No place had been set for me. Every seat had a name card except mine. Mom glanced over like she forgot I existed. "Oh, you can sit out by the grill. There's a folding chair on the porch." So I did. I sat outside next to a humming propane tank, cold seeping through the metal chair. Through the window, I watched Ashley laugh with cousins, her uniform crisp and perfect, her voice loud and clear. Every now and then, her eyes drifted toward me, not cruel, not kind, just unsure. Then the message came. I felt the buzz first, a vibration against my hip, from a device no one else in that house would recognize, slim, encrypted, military issue, hidden even from myself on most days. I tapped the screen. One line. Report to Fort Irwin. Observer assignment. Security Council oversight. I smiled. For the first time that night. Really smiled. I slid the device back into the hidden pocket of my coat and glanced at the family photo near the fireplace. Ashley, front and center. My parents, proud. Rows of medals, awards, certificates, dozens of frames, not a single one of me. That was fine, because someday, someone would salute me, and every frame on that wall would need rearranging. By the time I arrived at Fort Irwin, the desert sun was bleeding gold across the Mojave. Wind kicked up dust, and Ashley's unit was already in place. Recruits lined up beneath the stare of Sergeant Brock Carter, a legend on base. Word was he once chewed out a full bird colonel for using the wrong boot polish. He paced in front of the recruits, barking commands with a voice like gravel soaked in diesel. I stayed back, second row in the guest bleachers, behind two civilian contractors and a bored admin clerk checking her smartwatch. And then it happened. Carter's eyes scanned the crowd. They stopped. On me. He froze. Then, mid-stride, he turned, marched directly toward me. Recruits shifted nervously. Guests murmured. Carter came to a halt 2 feet in front of me, snapped to attention, and raised a sharp salute. "General Caldwell, ma'am. I wasn't informed you'd be present." I didn't return the salute right away. Instead, I said softly, "I'm off duty, Sergeant. Let's keep this low-key." Carter didn't flinch, just nodded once and turned sharply on his heel, not even glancing at the confused ranking officers 2 rows behind him. The drills resumed, but something in the air had changed. Whispers started, eyes flicked toward me, then snapped back to attention. My badge might have said observer, but the truth had already begun to ripple through the ranks like heat off desert pavement. Half an hour later, I slipped out through a side gate. My role was finished, but the fallout had only just started. By nightfall, Ashley sat on the edge of her bunk, quiet for once. Her roommate had already passed out, snoring gently in the corner, but Ashley's face, still flushed, still burning from the barrage of questions she'd faced all day. "Did you know your sister's a general? Is she Black Ops? Is that real?" The truth? She didn't know, not really. To her, I was still the one who bailed, the dropout, the sister who couldn't handle pressure and disappeared. Now? She wasn't so sure. After lights out, Ashley finally opened the old duffel bag I'd given her a year ago. Back then, I stopped by for 15 minutes, just long enough to hand it off like it held gym clothes and nothing more. She never bothered to look inside, but that night something pulled at her. Inside, in a false lining barely visible, she found it. A slim, matte black drive the size of a dog tag. She plugged it into her tablet. The screen flickered once, then turned black. White text pulsed softly. Restricted. Shadow it. Clearance required. Her fingers hesitated over the screen. Then she entered her cadet login credentials. Not much, just limited scope access, but enough. The tablet buzzed, paused, then displayed one final message before going dark again. "Welcome, Cadet Ashley Caldwell." At exactly 3:47 a.m., my secure line buzzed. Not a ping, not an update, a full spectrum alert. Clearance, level 4, protocol breach, origin, internal node, profile tag, Caldwell. That digital identity had been burned when I shifted from fieldwork to strategic oversight. That file should have been dead. Gone. Buried. But somehow it had been accessed. Not from the outside, from inside Fort Irwin. I yanked open the wall safe in my temporary quarters and retrieved my encrypted device. The screen lit up in red, unauthorized access detected, trace initiated. Someone had triggered a hidden program I helped build years ago, an early prototype called Alderson React. Most of the files tied to it had been purged, deleted, shoved into forgotten digital vaults. But one had resurfaced, briefly, just enough to activate a ghost protocol, one designed to flare when tampered with. When I entered the Strategic Coordination Office, the tension was thick, like the air before a storm. Major Cecilia Penn sat at the head of a narrow table, arms folded, her posture steel straight. She didn't greet me, just clicked her pen. Then the door behind me locked with a soft snick. "General Caldwell," she said coldly, "we logged an irregular access event, a clearance breach tied to your old deployment ID." "I'm aware," I said, calm but firm. "And it wasn't me." Penn raised a brow. "You'll understand if that's insufficient. The clearance initiated a subroutine tied to Alderson React." I didn't blink. "I built Alderson React." That gave her pause, which made this even worse. "You want access to the trace logs?" she asked finally. "No," I said. "I want to find out who just went grave digging, and why they knew exactly where to look." She hesitated, then slid over a provisional access token. 36 hours, she said. "Then this goes up the chain." Back in my suite, I launched a deep scan on the digital fingerprints. The access was sloppy, not covered well, but it felt familiar. The signature matched a device I hadn't touched in years, one I'd stashed inside a duffel, the same duffel I gave to Ashley. My stomach turned. She had no idea what she'd touched. That didn't matter now. The system didn't care about intent, only exposure. And exposure? That could trigger federal hearings, threaten operations still active in 3 regions, and rip the lid off programs that weren't even supposed to exist. I should have reported her. I didn't. Instead, I reached out to one of the few people I trusted, Sergeant Carter. I opened a secure back channel. "Need network logs, echo files, anything in your archive tied to base node access over the last 72 hours. At the end, I added one line. "This wasn't random. Someone wants me exposed, not just compromised." Inside Fort Irwin's digital, Carter stood beside me, arms crossed, always quiet, always watching. He didn't ask questions. That's what I liked about him. He didn't need to understand something to believe in it. I traced the breach backward, layer by encrypted layer, and then I found it. The Alderson React file hadn't been fully opened, just skimmed, just enough to ping the system. And it came from a temporary device, standard issue. I recognized the assignment ID. I gave it to Ashley during a live simulation 2 weeks ago. She kept it. She used it. I didn't storm into her barracks. I called her in. She entered slowly, posture tight, eyes flicking between me and Carter. "Sit," I said. She did. "You don't need to explain, yet, but you do need to understand. What you accessed isn't just sensitive, it's federal. That device was tied to a clearance profile the system flagged as active, even though it shouldn't be." She swallowed hard. "This isn't just a mistake," I continued. "From here forward, if you're not with me, you're a liability." The silence stretched, heavy, uneasy. Then she whispered, "You're a general?" I didn't answer. You never told us, she said. You never told me. I just wanted to know how much of you we never saw. I paused. Sometimes, I said quietly, hiding is the only way to survive when no one wants to see you. Her shoulders dropped. She didn't argue. That was new. I'm not reporting you, I said finally. You're coming with me. You're going to help fix this. Carter looked at me, then her. His voice was gruff. She screws this up. Neither of you's walking back into command. I know, I replied. So, we formed a trio, not out of trust but necessity, and we started digging. We dug through firewall logs, cross-checked packet trails, traced legacy echoes from old server nodes buried so deep they hadn't been touched in years. By hour 6, we found the crack. A server, unremarkable on the surface, had relayed the corrupted file chain, but when I drilled into its metadata, I found something chilling. A quiet implant slipped into the system 5 years ago. It wasn't new. It was ancient by cyber warfare standards, buried in a low-traffic sector, just deep enough to stay invisible until someone, Ashley, tripped it. I recognized the encryption pattern, a signature, distinct. It came from someone I hadn't thought about in years, Nathan Croft. Ashley leaned forward. Who is he? I didn't answer right away. 5 years earlier, Croft had been reassigned after a joint mission overseas, officially for protocol violations. Unofficially, whispers followed. Carter spoke for the first time in an hour. You want redemption? His voice was calm, almost cold. Then answer me this. Do you want a clean transcript, or do you want to do what's right? Because your sister just saved your future and didn't say a word about it. Ashley didn't argue. She just nodded, a quiet shift in her eyes. A start. Back at Fort Irwin's intelligence office, we launched a full forensic sweep of system archives. I requested admin access to older code bases, stuff that had been archived but never fully deleted. That's when we found the last breadcrumb. Server tag C17. Last admin N. Croft. Transfer record redacted. The screen didn't show much, but it didn't need to. Croft had hidden his virus in a ghost node, buried under lines of simulation code. I leaned back, heart pounding. He hadn't just planted the breach. He'd planned for someone to stumble into it. On the way back from the lab, Carter surprised me. There's a story about your sister, he said, still watching the hall like a soldier on patrol. Happened last year, Dniester River. 7 recruits caught between 2 forward positions during a live fire exercise. Enemy fire from both sides. Command called for retreat. I glanced at Ashley, but Carter kept talking. She didn't listen. Overrode the call. Took 2 medics and went back. Pulled out all 7. No backup. No orders. Ashley's jaw clenched. She didn't deny it. I looked at her differently. Like maybe, just maybe, the uniform meant something more than image to her. Back in the office, we pulled up the final trace. Croft had embedded his code 5 years earlier. Ashley just tripped it. But someone else left the back door open. Not by accident. Someone wanted me to walk through it. And Croft? He was watching. Carter handed me a printed contractor log. I scanned the list of names, mostly vendors, tech consultants, off-base specialists. Then one caught my eye. Alias, but the birthday matched. Too perfect to be coincidence. Nathan Croft had been working as a civilian consultant just outside Fort Irwin's perimeter, registered to a tactical AI sim project, legal, quiet, but positioned just right to observe from the shadows. "He's back," I said, using my shadow to get close. Ashley looked sick. "So what now?" "We catch him," I said. "We finish it." Strings of code replicated like wildfire, tearing into simulation frameworks, rewriting files faster than the system could defend. These weren't random data pulls. They were coordinated extractions. Old op outlines, tactical sims, defense scenarios, all carrying my name, my signature. It was a setup. Croft wasn't just trying to hack a system, he was framing me. Within minutes, my access was locked, my clearance suspended. Red warning banners lit the room like sirens. Internal threat. Classified. Tier 1. Ashley looked up, horrified. "Lena?" I didn't flinch. "Stay calm." Carter stayed at the door, fists clenched but still. Ashley stood suddenly, walked out, into the corridor. A minute later, she was in the operations briefing room, standing in front of a full panel of officers who had been summoned by the security breach alert. And she spoke. "It was me," she said. Her voice was low, steady. "I accessed the file. I triggered the alert. I used a device my sister left behind. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what I was doing, but this breach, it started with me, not her." The room went still. I used to think Lena walked away, that she gave up, but I was wrong. She's been carrying weight none of us ever noticed, and now she's paying for my mistake. Nobody said a word, but I heard about it within minutes. Carter just nodded once when I looked at him. He didn't smile, didn't need to. Then, just as we started catching our breath, another breach. This one from an external uplink. It wasn't about data anymore. Croft had hijacked access to simulated drone command systems, autonomous wargame networks. He was weaponizing the breach Ashley had opened. "I can stop it," I said. "You're locked out," Carter replied. "Not from everything," I said. Pulling a drive from my jacket pocket, it was old, scratched, and it held a mirrored patch I'd built years ago. One Croft wouldn't know existed. I plugged it into a blank terminal and bypassed the firewall manually. Typed a code I hadn't used in years. The screen split, 2 windows, one real, one bait. I launched a phantom command array, an illusion built to mimic the real drone command interface, but feeding Croft false data. It looked legit, but it was a sandbox, a trap. And then his signature blinked into view. Croft's interface lit up on the other end of the line. He'd taken the bait. "Got you," I whispered. The system pinged his physical location, civilian housing just outside the wire. Carter was already moving. Within 5 minutes, tactical teams swept in. Croft was in a makeshift command center, surrounded by stolen drives and patch cables. No guards, no panic, just him. When they cuffed him, he smiled, this thin, venomous grin that made my skin crawl. "You still think conscience is enough to survive," he said. "You should have been forgotten." I leaned in close. "Forgotten people don't trip kill switches," I whispered. "They rewrite the rules." The courtroom was colder than I expected, not in temperature but in feeling, like walking into a museum built on secrets. Everything in that tribunal hall at Western Command was polished and silent, but the air carried weight, the kind you can't see, only feel. The panel included a colonel, a military intelligence liaison, and 2 senior officers from Cyber Command. All of them stared like they were already halfway to a verdict. Ashley sat to my left, jaw tight, fingers laced. Carter stood off to the side, arms folded, unreadable as always. And across the aisle, wearing civilian clothes that didn't fool a soul, sat Nathan Croft. Still smug, still venomous, still dangerous. He began his testimony with a printed report, old, crisp, and rehearsed. "In this after-action summary," he said, tapping a highlighted section, We note a period of silence, an unreported window during Operation Candor. Major Lena Caldwell failed to disclose civilian casualties. It's reasonable to suggest she suppressed them to preserve her record. The implication cut deep. He was accusing me of war crimes. The colonel turned to me. "General Caldwell, your response?" I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. I handed over a laminated order sheet, Croft's signature scrawled across the bottom. "This is the clearance document," I said. "He authorized the sweep, not me. It's time-stamped, verified, final directive." Then I added, "He cut the comms line on purpose. So when I challenged the order, no one would hear it." There was a pause, tense, quiet. Then Carter stepped forward. "Permission to submit a digital recording," he said. The panel nodded. The audio played. My voice, 5 years younger but unmistakable. "Hold fire," it said. "There are heat signatures that resemble civilians. Wait for the recon team." That was the moment I defied orders. That was the moment I stood between Croft and a massacre. You could hear the tension drain from the room. Even one of the senior officers exhaled, a quiet breath of realization. Croft didn't move, didn't blink, but I saw it in his jaw, the grind of someone watching their plan unravel. Then Ashley stood. In her hands was a printed access log. Her voice was steady, but it shook just a little at the end. "This shows access from Mr. Croft's alias during his time as a civilian consultant. He entered restricted code bases at the kind you give when someone finally tells the truth that hurts." The colonel looked at me again. "You had a chance to report your actions at Candor," he said. "To be decorated. Why didn't you?" I looked straight ahead. "Because when survival depends on shadows," I said. "You don't drag people into the light just to pose for a photo. You protect them, even if they never know you did." Another pause. This one carried reverence. Major Penn nodded once. "By unanimous vote," she said. "The charges are dismissed, clearance reinstated, rank reaffirmed." Then she added something unexpected. "We'd like you to deliver the keynote at the Strategic Cyber Defense Summit next month. You'll speak on leadership, ethics, and classified integrity." As I stood, someone asked, "Would you like a public statement issued? To clear your name formally?" I shook my head. "If I'm stepping into the light," I said, "it'll be for truth, not forgiveness I never asked for." The summit hall at Fort Walker was packed. 300 faces, officers, scholars, cyber defense analysts, journalists. Not a single flashbulb went off. They knew what kind of story this was. I wore full dress blues, not a single medal on display, no ribbons, just the uniform. Behind me on the projector screen were 6 simple words: "Courage in the shadows, the Ghost War." I didn't clear my throat, didn't tell them my title. I just spoke. "I've never failed," I said. "I just chose to live where no one claps for doing the right thing." The air shifted. Chairs straightened. I told them about Candor, but not the place, not the names, just the decisions. The infrared scan that spotted a child near a window. The argument with command. The moment I held the mic and said just one word: "Wait." I told them what that word cost me. The medals, the spotlight, the narrative, and what it gave in return. 17 names that didn't get carved into stone. "I don't romanticize silence," I said, "but sometimes it's the only shield you have when the people you're protecting don't even know they need it." Then I saw her. Ashley. Front row, cadet uniform, informal. A binder in her lap. Inside was a proposal to overhaul cyber training programs, using the breach she'd triggered as a teaching model. She didn't smile, but she nodded. At the end, I closed with one final line. "The future of leadership isn't about being remembered. It's about remembering what matters. Then I invited her up. Ashley's hands trembled, but she walked tall. I used to think the tallest voice deserved the loudest praise, she said. But I was wrong. The ones who kneel, name, image, record, legacy. You'd be a national symbol, Penn said. A face of silent integrity. Then General Reynolds, who once refused to even speak Cander's name, added, "You'd inspire the next generation. The new doctrine. We're asking because this story matters." I asked one question. If I say yes, will my unit be exposed? Penn paused, then nodded slowly. There's always risk. Encryption only goes so far. I thought of Stanton, my teammate who lived through that operation and now ran a bakery in Ohio. Off-grid, quiet, free. I reached into my coat and handed Penn a sealed envelope. Inside was a letter, not with my name, but with my truth. If the next generation needs a story, I said, this is the one they should hear, without attaching my name. Reynolds looked stunned. I didn't care. I'd lived in the dark long enough to know which stories glow brightest without a spotlight. 3 days later, I stood alone on a military airstrip outside Spokane. The sky above the tarmac was gray, quiet, heavy with morning mist. The engines of a C-130 rumbled low and steady in the background. Another mission. Another departure. No send-off. No fanfare. I was used to it. The silence had always been the real ceremony. Ashley showed up right before I boarded. No makeup, just a clean uniform, her hair tucked tight beneath her cap, and a single silver pin gleaming on her chest. It wasn't official. It was handmade, passed from leader to leader, quiet and unspoken, a mark given by those who understood sacrifice. She handed me a small box wrapped in uniform cloth. Inside was my old Phoenix Command insignia, polished, restored. "I don't want to wear it," she said. "I want to live up to it." I held it in my palm, felt its weight. Not metal. Memory. I remembered Stanton's words from years ago, standing in a blizzard after the Candor op ended. We carry no names, only silence and trust. Ashley stood tall. Then, without a word, she saluted me. For the first time in our lives, and I responded, not with a salute, but an embrace. Firm, quiet, no words, no apologies, just everything unspoken. Before I boarded, I handed her a letter. "Open it," I said. "Only if you ever forget who you are." On the plane, as the engines climbed toward altitude, I pulled out an old photograph. It was worn at the edges, the ink faded, the snow in the image still biting after it used the exact simulation Croft tried to hijack. But now it was reframed, not as a story of failure, but as a case study in how unseen leadership, accountability, and redemption could reinforce national security systems. Ashley was tapped to co-lead the pilot program. She didn't brag about it, she just got to work. She wrote me a message that week. "You're not a legend. You're the reason I still believe in doing the right thing. You gave me permission to see the quiet heroes, the ones we never thanked." I didn't reply, not because I didn't want to, but because some messages deserve to land without an echo. 2 weeks after the tribunal, I received another envelope, this one stamped with the DoD's highest level seal. Inside, a formal invitation to join the National Military Ethics Committee. They wanted me to advise on covert operations protocols, whistleblower protections, and moral thresholds in digital warfare. They even offered me a speaking tour. My face on flyers, interviews, profiles, honors. I turned it down. Instead, I sent them a speech. No name, no credits, just words. When recognition requires a spotlight, maybe we've forgotten why we chose the shadows. I went dark again for a while, disappeared into the kind of work you don't write on paper. Tactical reviews, quiet missions, ghost operations buried beneath layers of classification. But something changed. I started writing. Not memoirs, not biographies, letters. To recruits I trained. To young cadets lost in the noise of ambition. To the ones who felt unseen in systems designed to celebrate only the loudest. I signed every letter with one line. Keep your promises, even if no one's watching. There was one last moment that stays with me. A year later, I was passing through Fort Redwood, dressed in civilian clothes. No rank, no patches, just me. I walked past a group of ROC cadets reviewing protocols in the rec room. One of them, maybe 19, held a printout of my summit speech. I saw it before she noticed me. She read a line aloud. "I've never failed. I just chose to live where no one claps for doing the right thing." Then she looked up. Our eyes met. She didn't know who I was. No recognition, no questions. And yet I smiled, because that's how legacy should feel. Not a monument, but a ripple. Sometimes I think about Croft, how he tried to rewrite my story with malware and malice, how he saw silence as weakness, as something to exploit. But what he never understood, what he could never touch, was that silence is a choice, a powerful one, because real strength, it doesn't announce itself. It endures. Thank you for sitting in the quiet with me. If anything in this story resonated, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment, tell me where you're listening from. Sometimes even the smallest reply reminds us that our stories echo further than we think. And if this message stayed with you, consider subscribing. There are more stories to tell, stories that live in the shadows, stories that remind us that being good isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just true. True strength doesn't demand applause. It lives in the shadows, endures betrayal, protects without praise, and walks away with peace. Sometimes the loudest voice in the room isn't the most honorable. It's the one that chooses silence to keep others safe. If you've ever felt invisible, unappreciated, or forced to shrink to survive, remember this: the world may overlook you, but that doesn't make your courage any less real. Let this story remind you, being a quiet hero is still being a hero.